because when we used to do the knitting circles in early 2000s, we would just make a poster saying, bring your knitting needles to such and such a place, put it on a lamppost, and people would come, you know. And then I got my first email address for running the knitting circle. But life is so different since then. Like that back then, the knitting needles were a sign that I am a creative person and I use this space for my own creative use. And now everything, the communities are so different since internet and Ravelry, social media. So it's very nice to be able to think about where my community work came from. Yeah, in 2000s, I mean, I got like 1,000 people knitting in the V&A. That's how unusual knitting was then. People hadn't seen it for 50 years. But I don't think that could happen now, because it's all so, everybody can show every row on their Instagram feed. So yeah, quite different. And then when internet started to come, the tribes, the way the circles formed were quite different. They became more local and they became more online. Then I went through quite a few years of running a knitting store, and there I would do circles there, but they were always socially engaged. So I would be targeting a specific group of people to use knitting as a way forward for something, be it, I don't know, single mothers, lonely elderly people. It could have been anything. We had a lot of people who were overworked with their job and they just wanted to see a final result of something. Even if they just finished a scarf, it would just anchor them because they had made something. So I kind of, it's exciting to look back for me, because I realized that knitting, I mean, I knew that knitting could excite most parts of society. Most people would be interested in it, and I've met so many different kinds of people through it. So that's exciting for me, but things are changing for me slightly now, in that now I am working with rag, which is much more local. You know, people can't travel for that. They have a huge stack of stuff to bring with them. But back in the early knitting days, the beauty of it was that you could just fit it in your handbag, and anybody could do that. I accidentally switched my practice to rag, or maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe I've been thinking of it all of my life. I'm not sure which. But I'd learned all this stuff from knitting communities, but I wasn't using it anymore, which was a good thing. I probably needed a break for a while. But then during lockdown, everybody cleared out their cupboards during lockdown. And most of us who know how to make things would keep that to use for patchwork or whatever it was. But a lot of garments got put out on the street. And then the refuse collectors were locked down and weren't collecting it, and neither were the charity shops. So there was a year when the streets were just full of clothes. But, you know, I knew it was a lockdown issue, but it was an indicator of what was happening in the whole world. I knew about fast fashion, and it's the second worst contributor to climate change. So I knew about the huge global rag pile that was piling up, but then it was right outside my door. So also it was a very cold winter that winter. So I really wanted just to chop up all this material and just make us a nice rug for the front room. But then as I started to chop and reevaluate the materials, I started to think that there could be a whole new career in there for me, but also just a way of bringing together a community that were asking me about what I was doing. Chopping up rag is very messy. It's dusty. Some of the fibres, there's a lot of synthetic fibres in rag. It's probably not too safe to inhale. and we know that it's sort of in the water supply and all the rest of it. But when I was ripping up the natural stuff, the cottons, I'd go and do it in the park just to save the dust in my house. And people would just come up to me and say, "What are you doing?" And when I start to explain, this has been on my doorstep for 3 weeks, I'm chopping it up, and here is my loom, and I'm going to make a doormat. People were kind of excited, and people started to ask me, and some of the other mums in the park wanted to join in. And social distancing, it's fine, because you know you've got a loom in between you. Knitting is it's a mother tongue, isn't it? You're there in Slovenia, you're my friend because you understand this knitting thing. That's very powerful, very good thing for communities. We've done a lot of environmental work where we go down the river and just pick up clothes out of the river. I don't know why people throw clothes in the river, but they do. And some of this is I've been writing a lot about, you know, how we get our heads around picking stuff up off the street or out of the river, because it's dirty, right? It's a taboo material, but it's still God-given stuff that has come, it's been grown out of the earth, and you know, it's not leaving this planet, it's got to stay here. So, and in pandemic it was quite a good time to explore that, because we were all wearing gloves and masks. So, you know, I would go around with my wheelbarrow and pick this stuff up, take it back, put it in the washing machine, and then after a 90-degree cycle, pull it out and find that it's new clothing. It's not being worn. You know, it's just people's whimsical mistakes. And within about a year, I'd say, after doing this, I built up a full colour palette. This is where, you know, and this is free material after chopping. Yellows and purples, more difficult. People don't wear yellow and purple, but a lot of blues through blacks, and a lot of dirty white t-shirts is another great polluter of this world. But they're great because you can dye them different colours, you know, if you're collecting the natural dyes. The old thermal underwear, yeah, the white t-shirt, school uniform, all through the dye pan. All of this work of pulling this material together is a thing that can really bind a community. Because say somebody is weaving and they really need a bit of pink, it's likely that somebody will suddenly find that right kind of pink on their way to the supermarket, pick it up, take it home, wash it, bring it into the workshop and go, "I found you, your pink." So, you know, everybody is thinking what everybody else needs, and that this colour palette of discarded materials belongs to everybody pretty much. Likewise, the physical work of processing this stuff. Some people love the action of ripping. You know, we had a lady who was deaf for years, and on the first day that she got her hearing aid, she came into the group and was just ripping. She just loved the sound of ripping, you know, so she does that. Whereas I've recently had an injury on my shoulder and I can't rip. Joan can rip. You know, this is a rebellious project still, whereas actually what it should be is a project where it just stops people worrying and gives them a way to just do the practical thing of letting their materials transcend from one product to another product. It's very simple, but for some reason it feels rebellious. Just like 20 years ago, it was a bit rebellious to do a bit of knitting in a public place. I mean, I found that hugely entertaining. It's the same thing now with the rag school, just a different era, causing trouble. That was the other thing I was going to say. It's really important to cause trouble. And while you're causing trouble, to do it with love all the people that you're causing trouble with. Because as soon as people start thinking that they're doing something good, then they want to be more good than the next person. I'm calling the book Rag School, but it's not a school because I can't teach it. All I can do is gather the people together and watch what happens. In a way, I'm being a medium, or what am I being? I'm not a teacher. I'm more a seer, actually, you know, someone that just sees things. So yes, I'm sort of writing from a new role. But I'm documenting what's made in the community. And I'm documenting a little bit about the history of making things out of rags and how it's just been trashed. 2 reasons. One is that things made out of rags in the home are loved. You know, they're put in high traffic areas of the home. They're proudly presented by the fireplace, by the front door. So they get worn until they disintegrate. And then even then, they probably get passed on to become pet bedding. Give it to the cat, give it to the dog. And then you probably put it on the compost heap. Because in an ideal world, if all your rags were like natural materials, it would just give you rich nitrogen back into the soil. So that's one reason why the history of rag has disappeared. We can't see it. The other reason is the art world. There's evidence that there's a lot of modernist artists that were using rugging as a medium. You know, once you've got your full color palette from all your community's clothes, you can just use it like paint, and you can make anything. You can make any image you want. Proddy with the hook going through the hessian, putting the little loops. And lots of artists did this. And again, they were sold or they were given away, and they went into people's homes and they were loved till they disappeared. But in the middle of all that, the art world didn't recognize textile rag work as art because maybe again, it's a taboo material. It's domestic, it's women's work, it's done in the home, probably done by children too. So it doesn't fit the criteria of a valuable piece of art.